Welcome to the Bloodcast. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Bloodcast. Good to have you back. First things first. You've noticed we have an intro now, and we also have an outro now. And I've used the same song as for the Pagan podcast because the Bloodcast is a pagan podcast in and of itself. So I think it will fit. The other thing that you probably noticed is that there was no episode last week, and this stems from my hubris that I thought I could put out an English and a German version of every episode in 1 week, and I just can't. So that means last week was the German version of this episode. Today is the English version, and we will continue with this from now on. So that means the next episode, so the second part of this episode, will come out in 2 weeks, and the German part, second part, will come out next week. Yes, another thing I have to talk about is that there will be a second part. I have way too much script for this topic, and I decided to split it because it's just too long for one episode. And another thing, the last thing I want to talk about is I've been very creative in the last 2 weeks. I've played a video game. It's called 33 Immortals. And for those of you who know, I've studied game development and app development in my time at university. And this game, for my understanding, did something that not many games can claim to have achieved. This game started a new genre of games. So the genre is for me a cooperative roguelite. So that means you're playing a roguelite. For those of you who don't, you know, and you play with up to 33 players in the lower difficulty. And this game works without TeamSpeak or Discord or any social interaction whatsoever. You're just communicating with emotes, and that's enough. And you always can go like fight for your own, but it's of course better to work in a group together. And the goal of the game is to defeat the boss of the stage you're playing. And this struck a creative nerve of me, and I want to make my own cooperative roguelite, but with a different lore behind it. Because from 33 Immortals, it's the lore of Dante's Inferno. Great book, you should read it. And I think a Norse approach to this genre would be a great idea. And so I'm working on a detailed design document at the time. And when I'm happy with it, I will pitch it to one of my friends who owns a game studio, and maybe we will play together my own game in a few years. Would be great. But in the meantime, I could show you what I'm doing right now with this idea, and maybe I can present it to you. Because when I'm streaming or when I'm uploading my videos here to YouTube, I could show you my document. I could show you the images that I'm creating, the characters, and the ideas behind it. And maybe it's interesting for you. Just let me know. Maybe I will put that just as a filler, or when you would like the idea, then I can present it maybe in a stream or something like this. We will see. But now, still a bit. My throat is still a bit sore. I'm still a bit sick, but I can manage to pull through 30 minutes of this script. All right. So the overall topic of this season is, of course, heroes and heroism. And in Germanic history, the greatest hero, maybe in ancient times, was Arminius, or Hermann, as he is called in modern German. And he fought a battle against the Romans, and he is always depicted of the zeitgeist. For the Nazis, he was, of course, the great German warrior that defeated the foreign aggressors. For the heathens, he is always depicted as some kind of heathen hero that defeated the Christian Romans. And I want to get this idea out of the world with this two-parter, because the Romans were heathens at the time as well, and so I'm not quite sure what the point of this is. And the last is, yeah, I want to talk in the second part how he is depicted in modern Germany. But first, we should start with an introduction. We talk about the sources. We talk about the actors that played a role in this battle, and of course, we'll talk about the battle in and of itself in this first part. So let's start. Introduction. The Battle of Teutoburg Forest, or also known as the Arminius Battle or the Varus Battle, took place in 9 AD, so 9 years after the death of Christ, after birth of Christ. 3 Roman legions, a total of approximately 15,000 to 20,000 soldiers, including auxiliaries and supply units, were decisively defeated by Germanic warriors, led by Arminius, a prince of the Cherusci tribe. We'll talk about them later. The defeat was a severe blow to the Roman Empire. 1/8 of the entire Roman army was wiped out. Rome subsequently abandoned its plans to transform the territories east of Rhine to the Elbe into Roman province, so Germany. The battle thus marks a turning point in Roman expansion into Germania. The battle had great symbolic significance for the Germanic tribes. It is considered an early act of resistance against the Roman domination. In retrospective, it has often been interpreted as a possible starting point of a later German nation or German national consciousness, even though Germany in the modern sense did not yet exist at the time. The exact location of the battle has not yet been conclusively determined. There are various theories, but since the 1980s, Kalkriese, near Osnabrück, a city in northwest of Germany, has been considered the likely scene. Numerous archaeological finds have been made there, and a museum with an adjoining park has been created. The Hermann or Varus monument near Detmold also commemorates this event. And the Varus monument or the Hermann, he's also close to the extern stones. That's probably a holy site of the Germanic people from ancient history. Let's talk about the sources that I found that talk about this battle. The first one is Velius Paterculus in his book History Romanae or Romane, and he wrote about this battle in 30 AD. A bit of context: Velius was a Roman officer and eyewitness to many events under Augustus and Tiberius, and he writes. He portrays Varus' defeat as a catastrophic event and emphasizes the shock and the defeat caused among the Romans. Varus is portrayed as naive, and Arminius is as a traitor because he was a Roman ally. The next source is Strabo in his book Geographica, book 7, and he wrote in 23 AD. Context: Strabo was not a military man, but a geographer and a historian. He relies on the accounts of others. He writes, he mentions Varus' defeat in a geographical context. He particularly emphasizes on how difficult the terrain in Germania was, forests, swamps, and inhospitableness, and how little Rome knew about the area. For him, the defeat is a proof that the nature and the natural world made German, I have to read it again. For him, the defeat was proof that the natural world made Germanic conquests impossible. I like that one. Tacitus, of course, when we talk about Roman sources, it's always Tacitus. And he wrote in 110 AD, so 100 years after the battle. Tacitus writes with the perspective of a historian seeking to understand the cause and effect. And he writes that Tacitus does not describe the battle of the Teutoburger Forest directly, but rather its consequences. Arminius, in particular, is portrayed as a hero of freedom, but also as brutal, ambitious, and violent. He describes how Germanicus, a Roman general, tried years later to avenge the defeat. In doing so, he found among the other things the bones of the fallen legionaries, and he succeeded in burying most of them somewhere. The grave of the Roman legions is not found yet. The next source is Florus. In his book Epitome Rerum Romanorum in 120 to 140 AD, so again 120 years after the battle, Florus summarized Roman history in the form of a patriotic as in a form of a patriotic account. Sorry, strange typo. He writes, the Battle of Teutoburg Forest is described as the Clades Maxima, the greatest defeat. He dramatized the destruction of the three legions, calls the Germanic tribes barbarians, of course, and presents the defeat as a serious wound to Rome. And when we talk about sources, the next one will always come up, and it's Cassius. Cassius Dio was in his book Roman History. It was written 200 to 230 AD, so again 220 odd years afterwards. Dio was a senator and historian, wrote in Greek, and summarized centuries of Roman history. He writes, his account is the most detailed. He describes the deception by Arminius, the Romans' rout, and the massacre in the forest that lasts several days. He also reports on the horror in Rome after defeat. Augustus is said to have shouted, Quintili vare legiones rede. Varus, give me back my legions. Let's focus a bit more on two of the sources because they wrote a lot, of course, and just to give a quick summary isn't enough. The first one will be Cassius Dio, and the second one is Tacitus. Cassius Dio describes how Varus treated the Germanic tribes as if they were already subjugated peoples, even though they were not yet officially Roman citizens or fully controlled provincial inhabitants. He introduced Roman administration, taxes, and courts, something that the Germanic tribes perceived as intrusive and degrading. He believed them to be already subjugated and treated them as if they were already part of the Roman order. Interpretation. Varus completely underestimated the Germanic tribes, both in their resilience and their political willfulness. His attitude was characterized by Roman arrogance. Instead of cautious diplomacy, he relied on control and force. Tacitus. He writes, or he describes Varus less directly but more through the behavior of the Germanic tribes afterwards. However, he makes it clear that Arminius exploits the dissatisfaction of many tribes with the Roman administration. What becomes clear between the lines is that Varus was considered someone who ruled with harshness and arrogance, and thus provoked the revolt. The Romans' fault. Tacitus calls Arminius a liberator of Germany, which only works if there was a prior perceived oppression. Let's talk about the two actors. Yes. First, of course, is Varus. His full name is Publius Quintilius Varus. He was born in 46 BC and died, of course, 9 AD. Publius Quintilius Varus was a Roman politician and military leader from a respected but not particularly influential family. He rose to high office under Emperor Augustus through clever connections and administrative work. Talk about his career. He was the governor in Africa and Syria. Varus proved himself primarily as an administrator in Syria. He was responsible for maintaining order, especially after the death of King Herod. He introduced Roman laws there and harshly suppressed rebellions. A foretaste of his later policies in Germania. Administration in Germania. Around 7 AD, Varus became governor of Germany, or Germania, on the east bank of the Rhine. He assumed that the area was already largely pacified and began to introduce Roman administration, taxes, and courts, without a regard of local structures. Germanic tribes found this humiliating and provocative. The Battle of Varus and the Death. In 9 AD, Varus fell into an ambush by Germanic warriors led by Arminius, the Cheruscan prince, officially allied with Rome. 3 Roman legions were destroyed, as we know, in the Battle of the Teutoburg Forest. Varus committed suicide during the retreat, presumable to avoid being captured. And in Roman culture, it's not frowned upon to commit suicide after a failure like this. Let's put it like this. The aftermath. Varus was henceforth considered a symbol of political arrogance, misjudgment, and ruin through hubris. Let's talk about Arminius. Arminius was born in 7 BC and died 21 AD. Arminius was a princely son of the Germanic Cherusci tribe. He's best known as the leader of the Germanic resistance against Rome, particularly through his history or victory in the Battle of the Teutoburg Forest in 9 AD. Early life. As a young man, Arminius was taken by the Romans as a hostage, a common means of securing the loyalty of tribal leaders at the time. There he received military training, obtained Roman citizenship, and even became an officer in the Roman army. He had the rank of a knight, if you can put it like this. He thus learned Roman warfare, language, tactics, and a way of thinking from the inside. And his turn to resistance. Despite his Roman education, Arminius returned to Germania with a long-term plan. He used his position as a Roman ally to forge a secret allegiance between several Germanic tribes. In 9 AD, he lured the Roman governor Varus and 3 legions into an ambush, the Battle of the Teutoburg Forest. Wow, that was very German. Forest. The defeat is considered one of the greatest catastrophes of the Roman Empire. After the victory, Arminius tried to achieve greater unity among the Germanic tribes, a kind of tribal allegiance under his leadership. However, many Germanic leaders distrusted him and were unwilling to give up their independence. Rome responded with several campaigns under Germanicus, but was never able to permanently conquer Germania. His death. In 21 AD, Arminius was murdered by relatives or rival tribal chieftains, presumably because they feared his growing power and claim to leadership. Arminius was stylized in later historiography, especially in the 19th century, as the liberator of Germania and a forerunner of a German national consciousness. And the Hermann monument, we talked about it. Let's talk about Arminius' tribe, the Cherusci. The habitat. Resident in northwestern Germany, primarily between the Weser, a river in Germany, and the Harz Mountains. Today, roughly Lower Saxony, parts of northern Hesse or Hessen, and Westphalia, surrounded by neighboring tribes such as the Chatti, Bructeri, Lombards, and Suebi. Society and structure. They weren't centralized, but organized in loose tribal associations. They were led by princely families like Segimir. He was the king or the chieftain. He was the father of Arminius. Decisions were made in the Thing. It's an assembly of free men. I think most of you will know what the Thing is. Noble retinues played a central role in warfare and politics, like in every other culture at the time. Cultural characteristics, strongly influenced by martial values such as honor, bravery, and loyalty. Retainer system, young men joined leaders to achieve fame. Roman influence in the 1st century AD through allegiance and military service, like with Arminius as an officer. So Arminius wasn't the only one. Religion and belief system. This is an important focus point, especially for broadcast and pagan podcast. They were a Germanic tribal. They had a Germanic tribal religion without permanent temples, like most of the Germanic tribes. The worship in sacred groves, moors, and springs. And they had three main gods, actually five. The three are for most of the Germanic tribes. It's Wodan, it's Odin, Dona, Thor, Tivats, Tyr, depending on their function, war, law, and magic. The other two significant gods I will talk in a point down. They had oracle rituals, for example, by horses or seers. Yeah, they prayed to horses. And of course, sacrificial acts, sometimes also human sacrifices, according to Tacitus. And when Tacitus talks about things like this, you always have to take it with a bit of grain of salt. And they had tribal gods and mythological forefathers. The first one is Tuisto, mentioned by Tacitus, again, grain of salt. A kind of forefather of the Germanic people, born from the earth, is the translation of his name. Interpretation controversy. The interpretation is a bit controversial here. Possible a mythical figure, androgynous creator figure, or a deity ancestor. In later interpretation, seen as a twin god or precursor to Odin, but that's speculative. He symbolizes the deep roots of the Germanic tribes in the earth, the origin, and the natural environment. So I think it makes sense to have some kind of twinned god at this time, because in my theory, all tribes that started like 4 to 20,000 years ago started with a mother goddess, because the most important thing is when you are gathering a bunch of people and trying to survive is to have more people. So birth and giving life is a very important topic for these people in the first years or first generations. So I think a mother goddess would be the perfect goddess at this time. And afterwards, you need some kind of more manly figure, like a warrior or somebody that can defend these people that know here and born. And Tuisto is the perfect example for a transitional god. So we have this mother aspect, so he has a female side, and he's slowly transforming into this male defender god that will, in the end, will be Odin for most of the tribes. Let's talk about the son of Tuisto. This is the son of Tuisto, according to Tacitus, grain of salt, is the ancestor of all Germanic tribes. According to the tradition, he had three sons, from whom the three major Germanic tribe groups emerged. The Ingvions, they lived northwestern coastal tribes, northwestern Germany coastal tribes. The Herminones, central Germanic tribe, presumably including the Cherusci, and the Istviones, western tribes on the Rhine. Similar of the name to man, Latin manus, Germanic man, suggests a symbolic meaning as a primordial man. Let's talk about the warfare of the Cherusci. They were lightly armored infantry with spears, projectiles, and shields. They used the forest and the terrain for fighting instead of the open fields. They used guerrilla tactics, ambushes, exploitation of terrain, and advantages of movement. They had no standing army. Most cultures at the time of the Romans didn't have a standing army. And they had military campaigns, and they had of course military campaigns, the Cherusci, but they were organized when needed. Let's talk about their historical significance. And of course, the most important thing is, of course, the Battle of the Teutoburg Forest. Again in German, forest. Let's leave it in. Afterwards, Arminius attempted to establish a tribal allegiance, but failed due to internal conflicts. After his death in 21st AD, the tribe declined in importance. In the 2nd century AD, the Cherusci disappear from Roman sources. They were presumably absorbed by neighboring groups such as the Saxons. And the sources for the Cheruscis are, of course, mainly recorded by Roman historians like Tacitus, Cassius Dio, Velius Paterculus, And yeah, last thing to get a bit of a idea how the Romans thought about the Cherusci. They described them with a mixture of respect and, of course, cultural arrogance. But again, this is for all tribes at this time. The Romans were, of course, the leading folk at the time, and they knew it. Let's talk about, as my last point on my list of on the course of the battle. So, how did the battle commence? Background: in the late summer of 9 AD, the 3 Roman legions under Publius Quintilius Varus were on their way to their winter camp on the Weser River. The column was heavily the army was heavily laden with supplies, administrative equipment, families, and baggage. Then Arminius reported an uprising that had broken out in the territory of the Bructeri. Varus then changed the route and led his troops straight into a trap. Okay. I hope my microphone doesn't pick it up. The ambush. The Romans marched in a kilometer long, or many miles long, many kilometers long, vulnerable march through the Teutoburg Forest, an area of narrow roads, dense forests, swamps, and hills. Due to the terrain, they had to abandon their close marching and fighting order. The legions were no longer moving as a compact army, but in long, confusing sections. This is precisely what the Germanic tribes took advantage of. In small groups, they targeted individual sections of the column, then disappeared back into the forest, a classic guerrilla tactic. The Romans were unable to form their legions, lacked an overview, and lacked clear leadership. The attacks came from all directions without any predictable patterns. Multi-day fighting and emergency fortification. The battle dragged on for 2 to 3 days. Roman troops reportedly attempt to retreat or regroup. Isolated units built temporary fortifications, small ramparts or camps with palisades, to protect themselves or to gain time for an orderly retreat. However, there was a lack of coordination and supplies, and the terrain made any movement almost impossible. In the end, the resistance was hopeless. The Germanic warriors had coordinated their efforts under Arminius and controlled the entire area. Varus and many officers committed suicide to avoid being taken prisoners. After the battle, the Germanic tribes plundered the battlefield. There are reports of ritual sacrifices and trophy making. Arminius attempted to capitalize on the momentum and attacked Roman forts west of the Rhine, including Aliso. The defenders there, including some survivors of the battle, were able to repel their attack and later withdraw in orderly fashion. The consequence of the Battle of Teutoburg. Three legions, the 17th, 18th, and 19th, were completely destroyed. Roman was shocked. Augustus is said to exclaimed, "Varus, give me back my legions." Roman expansions into the west has halted. The Rhine maintained the permanent border between the Roman Empire and Free Germania. And that's pretty much all for my script today. I feel that my voice is abandoning me. I'm abandoning my voice. I'm feeling that my throat is getting sore by the minute. And this was the first part of this script. We will later talk on a bit more on how Arminius is depicted in later sources, how this battle was found again, because it was forgotten for thousands of years, or at least 1,000 years, until we found again these Roman books and scriptures that were long lost and forgotten. And yeah, I hope you enjoyed it, the first part, and we will talk again in 2 weeks in the Bloodcast. Stay tuned. And now the intro. Enjoy.
Where the mystic waters flow, stories of the gods in whisper soft and low. Oh, to say the amassed, guiding souls anew through the pagan podcast. The old tales unfold in echoes bold and vast. In the heart of the forest, the spirits of the past. Drums beat like thunder, voices soar and cast a spell of wisdom deep in the pagan podcast. Modern hearts entwined with the lore of yore, finding paths and travel through ancient door. Hidden souls alight in the present as the past, weaving faith's new tapestry, world beliefs are cast. Under the northern lights, where the coincide, the essence of the spirits never truly die. In each tale a lesson, in each story contrast, reborn through the ages, in the pagan podcast.